When researchers started digging into populations around the world with extraordinary metabolic health, they weren't expecting to find such a consistent pattern. Whether you look at rural communities in Asia, indigenous groups in South America, or some of the longest living populations on Earth, their diets, though thousands of miles apart, shared surprising similarities. And one of those similarities stood out more than almost anything else. They all centered their meals around foods that naturally help the body manage blood sugar with remarkable efficiency. Not supplements, not fancy powders, not injections. Foods, real foods. And the more scientists examined these eating patterns, the clearer it became. Certain whole plant foods don't just help regulate blood sugar, they can actually help reduce it naturally. I'm Dr. Michael Greger, and today we're diving deep into what the science shows about foods that can help lower blood sugar, improve insulin sensitivity, and even reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes. Because while nearly half of adults in some Western countries now struggle with either diabetes or prediabetes, we also know that in many parts of the world, diabetes was once considered almost non-existent. So something changed, and the evidence overwhelmingly points to diet. But instead of focusing on what raises blood sugar, today we're focusing on what brings it down, and not in a temporarily quick fix sort of way. We're talking about long-term, measurable improvements shown in randomized controlled trials, the gold standard in nutrition research. Studies where participants actually ate specific foods day after day and had their fasting glucose, insulin resistance, and A1C tracked by researchers. And it turns out the star players aren't always the foods people expect. We're going to talk about some of the most powerful anti-diabetic foods ever studied, from berries to beans to a surprising leafy green that keeps showing up in clinical trials for its unique ability to improve blood sugar control. People sometimes think lowering blood sugar requires cutting carbs across the board. But the irony is that some of the foods with the strongest blood sugar lowering effects are in fact carbohydrate-rich, because they're packaged with fiber, antioxidants, and phytonutrients that completely change how the body processes them. The key isn't avoiding carbs, it's choosing the right carbs, whole, intact, minimally processed plants. Let's start with one of the most fascinating discoveries, the incredible metabolic power of berries. Their researchers have been studying berries for decades, but one particular finding surprised even the scientists conducting the trials. When participants consumed blueberries or strawberries with a meal, their blood sugar spikes after that meal were significantly reduced, sometimes by as much as 25%. But what really shocked them was that even when the berries were eaten hours before the meal, the blood sugar lowering effect persisted. This suggests that the phytonutrients in berries help modulate glucose metabolism in a lasting way, improving how the body handles sugar-rich foods throughout the day. In one study, people were given a sugary drink, about as blood sugar spiking as it gets, and those who had berries beforehand had dramatically lower post-meal glucose levels than those who didn't. The leading hypothesis is that berry polyphenols help slow the digestion of starches and sugars while simultaneously improving how effectively cells respond to insulin. That combination makes berries one of nature's most powerful blood sugar regulators. But berries aren't the only plants demonstrating effects that rival medications. Another food group has been repeatedly shown to lower not just blood sugar, but also insulin levels, cholesterol levels, and inflammation. And that's legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas, and peas. In controlled feeding studies, where scientists literally weigh and prepare every bite participants eat, swapping out refined grains or animal protein for beans leads to significant improvements in fasting blood sugar within weeks.
One particularly impressive trial found that people with type 2 diabetes who ate at least 1 cup of legumes daily had greater reductions in A1C than those who simply added whole grains. That's how potent beans are. And one reason is their low glycemic index, meaning they cause a slow, steady release of glucose rather than a rapid spike. But the magic doesn't stop there. Beans also create what's called the second meal effect. You eat beans at lunch, and your blood sugar response to dinner many hours later improves. Few foods have that kind of extended metabolic benefit. Then there's the fiber. Most people eating Western diets get maybe 10 to 15 grams of fiber a day, but populations with virtually no diabetes often get 5 or 6 times that amount. Fiber is one of the most powerful tools the body has for stabilizing blood sugar because it physically slows the absorption of sugars into the bloodstream. Think of it like a metabolic shock absorber. And beans are one of the richest whole food fiber sources on the planet. But what if you're looking for something with an immediate effect, something measurable within hours? Enter leafy greens, and one in particular, spinach. Researchers found that when people added spinach to a high glycemic meal, like white bread or rice, their blood glucose response dropped significantly. Not because spinach has some exotic phytonutrient, but because it contains nitrate-rich compounds that help improve endothelial function and insulin sensitivity. The chlorophyll, magnesium, and antioxidants don't hurt either. But spinach isn't alone. Dark leafy greens, kale, arugula, collards, Swiss chard, all help reduce insulin resistance and oxidative stress, two major drivers of high blood sugar. In fact, vegetable consumption overall is one of the strongest predictors of diabetes prevention in large population studies. People who eat the most vegetables have the lowest risk. Yet there's another category of foods with extraordinary evidence behind them: whole grains. Not white flour, not breakfast cereals dusted with vitamins, real whole grains, intact oats, barley, quinoa, bulgur, and brown rice. And out of all of them, barley might be the most powerful. In clinical trials, people who ate whole barley experienced significant reductions in fasting blood sugar within days. Barley contains a special type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan, also found in oats, which forms a gel-like substance in the digestive tract that slows glucose absorption. But barley's beta-glucan is particularly effective. Some researchers even refer to barley as a functional food specifically for blood sugar control. Oats, too, have been extensively studied. Participants eating oat porridge or even adding oat bran to meals show improved insulin sensitivity and lower A1C levels over time. And it's not the carbs themselves doing the damage, it's the lack of fiber in processed foods. When grains are left intact, the body processes them in a completely different way. But whole grains aren't the only carbohydrates that help regulate blood sugar. One of the most unexpected discoveries is the role of resistant starch. This is a type of starch that acts like fiber in the body. It resists digestion in the small intestine and becomes food for beneficial bacteria in the colon. Foods high in resistant starch, like cooked and cooled potatoes, green bananas, lentils, oats, and beans, can significantly improve insulin sensitivity. In fact, in some trials, resistant starch performed comparably to glucose-lowering medications. And you don't need much. Just one serving a day can make a measurable difference within weeks. But while fiber and resistant starch play major roles, there's another mechanism at work that often goes overlooked: antioxidant capacity. Chronically elevated blood sugar creates oxidative stress in the body, basically an overload of free radicals, and oxidative stress damages insulin-producing cells. So foods rich in antioxidants can help restore and protect the pancreas. And which foods are richest in antioxidants? Spices, herbs, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. One spice in particular has garnered attention: cinnamon. Some studies show modest improvements in fasting glucose, though results are mixed. But cinnamon has another benefit: it slows gastric emptying, which can reduce post-meal glucose spikes. It's not a miracle spice, but as part of a whole food diet, it can help.
Turmeric and ginger show promise too, especially for reducing inflammation, which plays a major role in insulin resistance. And when researchers looked at antioxidant-rich diets overall, the people eating the most antioxidant-dense foods had the lowest rates of diabetes, by a wide margin.
Then there are nuts and seeds. Despite being calorie-dense, nuts have an impressive ability to stabilize blood sugar. Almonds, pistachios, walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, they all help reduce glucose spikes when eaten with or before a meal. The healthy fats, fiber, and plant compounds slow digestion and improve insulin response. In one randomized trial, participants who ate about 2 ounces of nuts per day experienced significant improvements in both fasting insulin and A1C. But perhaps one of the most fascinating foods studied for blood sugar control is vinegar. Yes, simple vinegar. When participants consumed a tablespoon or two before a meal, researchers found significant reductions in post-meal glucose levels. Vinegar appears to temporarily improve insulin sensitivity and slow the breakdown of starches into sugar. While not a cure, it can be a helpful tool, especially when used alongside whole plant foods. And you don't even need fancy apple cider vinegar. Plain white vinegar works just as well in the studies. Now, people often ask, if all these foods help reduce blood sugar naturally, why are diabetes rates skyrocketing? And the answer is simple. Most modern diets are almost completely missing these foods. Ultra-processed foods have replaced whole foods. Animal products crowd out beans, greens, and grains. Sugary beverages outcompete berries. High-fat, high-calorie meals impair insulin signaling. And fiber, one of the most protective nutrients, is often practically non-existent in daily intake. But the good news is that the body's ability to regulate blood sugar is remarkably resilient. Even small changes can lead to measurable improvements. In fact, in many trials, participants didn't have to overhaul their entire diet. They simply added in foods like beans, berries, greens, or whole grains, and their metabolic markers improved. But the biggest transformations happen when people adopt a fully whole food, plant-based pattern. Studies show that plant-based diets, rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, can reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes by up to 50%, or even reverse insulin resistance in some cases. Participants often see improvements within just a few weeks. Why? Because whole plant foods address the root causes. Fat buildup inside muscle and liver cells, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and impaired insulin signaling. When you remove the foods that cause insulin resistance and replace them with foods designed by nature to nourish and protect the body, the results can be remarkable. And it doesn't require perfection, it just requires consistency. Imagine starting your day with a bowl of steel-cut oats topped with berries and flaxseed. Your blood sugar stays steady, your insulin sensitivity improves, and your body is better prepared for the meals ahead. Lunch could be a hearty bean and barley soup with a big side of steamed greens. Now you're tapping into the second meal effect, reducing glucose spikes for the rest of the day. Dinner might be a chickpea and quinoa bowl, loaded with vegetables and drizzled with lemon tahini dressing. Slow-burning carbs, antioxidants, fiber, and healthy fats all working together to keep your blood sugar balanced. And throughout the day, snacks like nuts, apples, chia pudding, or hummus with whole grain crackers reinforce stable energy and support metabolic health. As the research continues to show, the foods that reduce blood sugar naturally aren't rare or hard to find. They're some of the most affordable, accessible, and nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Berries, beans, lentils, leafy greens, whole grains, nuts, seeds, spices, vinegar. Foods that have nourished humans for thousands of years. Foods that work with the body, not against it.
Foods that don't just mask symptoms, but help address root causes. And that's why this message is so important. Because with diabetes affecting hundreds of millions of people worldwide, the solution isn't hidden in a bottle. It's growing in fields, hanging from branches, and sitting right there on the shelves of your local grocery store. Your body has incredible healing potential, and every meal is an opportunity to harness it. If you found this video helpful, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more evidence-based nutrition content, and check out the next video to keep learning how to take back control of your health, one plant-powered bite at a time.